superstar status overnight. One moment, he's like a J.K. Rowling, you know, writing a novel on the kitchen table at home. And the next minute, boom, she's instantly well-known all around the world. Same thing, but on a much bigger scale, because in those days, there weren't the mega superstars in volume like we have today, because you think of the media expansion today. Back then, you know, if you're on national broadcast, NBC, that is a big, big deal, because very, very few people are doing that. And he was such a star that he could pull that type of audience. And this is Carnegie Hall. Have a careful look at this. This is the photographer couldn't fit the whole thing into the shot. So this is only one half of Carnegie Hall. And they're packed up, I don't know how many floors this thing goes to, but they're packed to the rafters, as we say, as an idiom in English. They're packed to the top. And that's to hear him speak. It was that type of superstar status that he had instantly attracted. And this is in Buenos Aires. 500 people to a public preview. We run public previews today. Trust me, I'd love to have 500 people come to a public preview for Dale Carnegie. But back then, that was the sort of audience that they could pull. This is no Dale Carnegie there. This is the people running the Dale Carnegie training in South America, in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, who are attracting 500 people to come and hear about his principles and how it works. So phenomenal take-up. Everywhere he went, this is actually on a ship, he's on a cruise, can't escape, he's got to talk. So here's a guy who, like a lot of people, spent a long time becoming an overnight success. From 1912 to 1936, he was not nationally known. He was known in the training world, he was known in the business world as a trainer, personally taught 5,000 classes, but he was not a brand name. And then he came out with this book a little bit later. Because what he discovered was, you know what, I'm teaching people really grow their confidence, grow their leadership skills, grow their communication skills, grow their people skills. But when they're under a lot of tension and stress, it's all starting to break down. And it's a very sad comment that 100 years ago, the problem he's facing and the problem we're facing today around stress and depression, etc., is not that different. 100 years ago, if you had minor amounts of stress, you just persevered and carried on. If you got really highly stressed and you became sick, then you went to hospital or possibly an institution. 100 years later, what happens? If we have minor levels of stress, you just carry on. If you have higher levels of stress, you get pharmaceuticals. But then and now, there's not much in between. This was a book written for the in-between. So you could self-medicate in a way through taking different principles that he devised by talking to people about how they dealt with stress, putting them into a book to help us control ourselves before we get to a state where we need pharmaceuticals or hospitalization. And then this book, again, became very, very powerful in building his brand. And so this is the Japanese version, Michiwa Hirakiru, also great bestseller. And this country certainly needs some help in the stress relief department. In fact, we have some representatives from the Acumen organisation who published the British Chamber Journal. In the next online bulletin, e-bulletin, I've written an article on stress management, and it's referring to some of the principles in this book, because and I start talking about, if you've ever been standing on a platform in the morning wondering why your train is late, there's a reason for that. Someone's killed themselves on the train track. And there's basically 3 suicides a day going on in Japan. So there's a lot of help needed. So this is not necessarily an idea that we've actually fixed. So Dale Carnegie grew up classic in Missouri, and Will's from Missouri, right? And he grew up poor. He grew up in a very poor farming family, the classic rags to riches American dream success story. And then his book's now been published in Japan in different volumes. This is the latest book, just come out recently. The Japanese version of this book will be released next month, called Hito ga Kasu 2. Instead of in English, it was How to Influence People in the Digital Age, which is trying to take what he was talking about and take it to this current era and the sort of different interactions that we face. So Dale Carnegie passes away in 1955. Now, if your brand is built around one man, what do you do when the one man's gone? And there's no successor to the brand name because his daughter was only a child, a young child, 2 or 3, maybe 4 years old when he passed away. And because it was a licensed business where people around the world would have the Dale Carnegie license, they called them sponsors in those days, and they would run the business. There was no natural successor to Dale Carnegie. So the likelihood was it was going to end right there. That would be the end of it. Except for a very powerful and important person, his wife, Dorothy. Now, Dorothy was his secretary, and she became Mrs. Carnegie. And on his passing, into her office came some of the more senior guys in the organisation who had their own licensed areas. They were running the Dale Carnegie training business there. Go back to 1955. I mean, today we can hardly believe it, but in 1955, no one thought that a woman could run a company. I used to watch some episodes of that TV series Mad Men, set in the 50s, and I remember an episode, there's a particular episode where, same thing, the woman was the daughter of the father who started the company, and they rejected her ideas because she was a woman. And when you look at it, you laugh because it's so ludicrous. But back in 55, that was reality. Now, Dorothy was a very strong person. She kicked those guys out of her office, said thank you very much, and she went out and she hired clever people. She hired experts in different areas to work for her. And the difference between Dorothy and Dale Carnegie was not a particularly business-oriented guy. He was an artist. He loved training people. He personally taught more than 5,000 classes. Think about that. He developed this idea, and he pioneered it, and he saw it grow, and he saw it grow immensely in North America, particularly in South America. And he loved the art. He loved what it did because he could see people growing. He could see it changing their lives in front of his very eyes. And I don't know if there's any engineers in the room. Any reformed engineers or engineers in this room? Pretty hard to pull an engineer in an FCC meeting. Oh, we've got one over here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, son, thank you. He loved training engineers. Why? Because they're so hopeless. They were absolutely hopeless in people skills and communication. They were smart people. They were technical people. They were very, very good in their field on their own. But when they got promoted, they had to deal with managing people. They couldn't do it. They came in droves to his training because they discovered they had a facility lack that he could fill. And so he was the artist. And he liked engineers particularly because in one series of sessions, he could just see like bamboo growing, getting better and better every week. So Dorothy is really, she is the soul of the international network. Now there are 298 offices in 86 countries around the world. Now just think about those numbers, 298 offices in 86 countries around the world. This is a multinational company of very big proportions. How many multinationals do you know that have got 298 operations on the ground in 86 countries? Not so many. Now, we don't think of Dale Carnegie as a multinational, but it is a massive multinational by any comparison. And 90% of the Fortune 500 companies are using this training. Now, if it didn't work, trust me, they wouldn't be using it. And if it wasn't current, trust me, they wouldn't be using it. And you don't get the most powerful corporations in America adopting this training unless they see a return on investment, an ROI in this. And so he founded something in 1912, which I doubt he could have imagined would be at the stage where it is today. I don't think he could have imagined 86 countries. He probably didn't think about 86 countries. He probably thought more in terms of the soul of what he was teaching. Before he passed away, 2 years before he passed away, Harry O'Han was one of his early trainers and disciples. And in fact, he's so unbusinesslike. Can you imagine this? He gave half of America to one guy. Half of America. He said, there's the line down the middle. Harry, that's yours. Take care of it for me, please. Just before he died, he visited Harry O'Han in Los Angeles. And he said, he knew time was coming up for him. And he said, Harry, keep my dream alive. Because he He wasn't going to be around. That's the artist, not the businessman. But today, thanks to Dorothy, it's become a global operation. And that global strength is very important. We talk about the brand. The brand is whatever it is in that country. The brand is whatever it is in that culture. The brand is whatever it is in that language. The brand is whatever it is in the delivery. And so when we get to convention every year, it's a massive UN-style operation. People all around the world, all of that expertise, all of that exposure coming together in the one place, refreshing the brand constantly. We are ISO 9001 certified, which is very strict in terms of what they expect us to keep doing, in terms of polishing our delivery component, which is the training. And so Mr. Crom here in the middle was a previous president of Dale Carnegie, part of the family from Dale Carnegie's previous marriage. And so it is very much a family business as well. And I'll give you a little episode. My first opportunity to go to convention was to Miami 2 years ago. So I don't know anything. I've just, I bought the company, but I didn't work in the company the first couple of years because I was running the National Australia Bank. And then I got a chance to come into the company. I go to the first convention. I'm the new boy. I don't know anybody. And I'm at one of the functions, and I'm chatting with Dorothy Dale Carnegie, the daughter. Like, what an honor, And she's chatting with this guy, and he's got a moustache, and he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He's got long hair and a ponytail. I think, this guy doesn't quite look Dale Carnegie to me, But she's very friendly with him. And then I was talking to him later, and I found out that he actually is the guy that organises the convention. So all the cameras and the sound gear and all the sort of backstage stuff, his company does that. They've been doing it forever. And he said, I really like your organisation. I do this every year. I don't make any money. It's always the last job in the year, but I always like to come because you people really walk the talk. I'm thinking, what's he talking about? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, look, you guys actually follow the principles, You actually do what you say you should do. I thought, yeah, well, what do you mean? So, well, look, I do this for a living, so I'm going to conventions all over the place. The top motivational speakers are my clientele. I'm organising their events for them. I'm on the headset. I'm backstage. I hear everything. I see everything. And I see what's being delivered out front, but I also hear what's going on, and I see what's being delivered out the back. And a lot of times, it isn't the same thing. So what I like about your organisation is it is always the same thing. And that is the brand, the purity of the brand. Keep my dream alive. Change people's lives. That is why the brand works.